Resilient Systems. And the facilitators are Dr. Madiz and Dr. Might. So with a round of applause, let's welcome them to do their presentation. 20 minutes. I'm told their content is loaded, so 20. I'll do 5-minute questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassandra. Let me see. Is it still good morning or good afternoon? Yes, this will be a joint presentation, but I'll let Mike start. So Mike, you will use 19.5 minutes, and then I'll come for the last 30 seconds. Thank you.
So our group had to do a few things. On the board, sustainable and resilient systems is what we are supposed to work on. And to put you in perspective, we will first give you a bit into an expanded version of our appreciation of the sector. And then the findings and emerging issues was intertwined with major policy takeaways. And then planning and advancement of the actions from all this. And we'll give you some concluding comments. So first, in terms of sustainable and resilient system, next slide, we want to flag the issues around not only pandemics, because pandemic is just on health. There are other emergency situations that may come our way, much as there are other disaster-related issues that may come our way. We don't want situations to come before we get prepared for them. So we bring all those issues into perspective in our discussion. To do that, we looked at dimensions of prevention, preparedness, response, and issues that are more germane to the sector, being responsive to the sector. So those are the things we looked at. Please move on to the next slide. We are done with all this. Let's move on. So in terms of findings, again, move to the next 2 slides. Great. In terms of findings and policy takeaways, you definitely know that these are married. And so once you get a finding, we want to see the implication for policy. So we will keep seeing them intertwined in the presentation. So schools are created or enhanced to provide safe, secure, and non-discriminatory environment. This is already known in literature and all that. But we are looking at things from 3 broad areas of the environment of the school. The first having to do with the quality of infrastructure and structures. To the more specific side, this must influence inclusivity as much as possible. And indeed, the dimensions of inclusivity are broad range, and they are there. So we looked at that. We look at psychological and well-being in times of emergencies and in times of disasters. Health, safety, and neighborhood-related issues are also flagged in our work. Next slide. To do all this and to ensure that schools are safe, these are the key things we are flagging. Community involvement should be deepened and enhance school community relations. We have done the SMC business, we have done the PTA business in the past, and we continue to do them. But in terms of resilience, in terms of emergencies, and in terms of disasters, how can we harness the community as well as the district level engagements? National level policies may not do the trick in such times, because how one district gets affected is different from how another district gets affected. And indeed, the degree to which attention, resources, policies must be deployed for one district is definitely going to be different from another. And so community level engagement is called to the fore. Role of the school itself, wherefore the members of the school naturally being the leadership of the school, the teachers, the learners, the parents, as it were, and the school management committee members also come to the fore. Policies and minimum standards that schools need to know and enforce are also called to the fore, and this has to do more importantly with the implementation culture. At least in the past 25 years, a lot of things that support schools to become better have been done in this country very much. And the literature is so rife in terms of these documents as we have them. But is that enough? I think the level of deepening of engagement is important. Capacity building and generation of gatekeeping roles. occasional as and when activities around security in the schools, fumigation, when it becomes necessary, they ought to be done, and there should be minimal standards for that. Next slide, please. Again, ensuring and safety, harnessing the role of other state and non-state structures in the environment of collaboration and coordination is a very important thing we need to be thinking about. And complementary support for all categories and all cross-cutting groups, especially special needs persons, girls, disadvantaged, those from rural places, and indeed those who can be underserved by social justice ends needs to be looked at carefully. All right. So, yeah, next slide, please. Great. Awareness creation regimes and gatekeeping activities have also been mentioned. We continue to make the case that if homes and parents are not aware, there will be huge difficulty in making sure that allowing their kids to go back to school, that schools are safe and all that, would it become possible. Early identification and red flagging is another important issue to check whenever issues around preparedness come to the fore. Undertaking mapping of potential safety issues, preferably at the centralized levels, i.e. regional and district, will be more preferred. Because urban areas have their situation much as rural areas and peri-urban areas have. Culture, agriculture, and all other dimensions demarcate geographical zones, and to that end, this must be taken into consideration. But dealing with all this will require us to get a kids to school, and so one major issue we flagged in terms of sustainability and resilience is managing absenteeism concerns. One, we need to design and promote school attendance databases that links to the data points. And so information about other data sources are there, about school health, you know, name them, guidance and counseling activities and other social activities. We should have common data that can speak to this other data to make sense and for judgment and indeed decision making. Ideally, if all these data points can be linked, and we are aware that through Gallup, some of these data linkages are happening. But what is very key is that there should be a unique ID. You can call it social security number of the child, so that if the child moves from one district to another, or moves from a private school to a public school, we will not call that child as a dropout, but the system efficiency measures can be activated and data will be speaking the actual language of the movement of the kids. The generator of the EMIS data, which is the district or the circuit or the school, owns it, and the capacity to harness how it is used and use it for internal efficiency measures is very important, and indeed decision making. The one that is given at the national level is indeed for the national picture, so we don't wait until the national data comes back to you who generated it before you can use it for decision making. It is important that is also controlled. There is need to build the capacity of district officers, especially administrators and planners, to be able to analyze and utilize data. In that regard, three things are flagged. Absenteeism dynamics management, as well as local response options available, needs to be thought through carefully at the district level. And indeed, what applies in District A may not apply in B and C. Learning assessment data utilization. The over-reliance on examination data for major decision making about learning and system efficiency measures needs to be relooked at. We prefer the NSAT generated ones, probably NEA generated ones, or learning assessment generated ones for more decision making about remediation and learning. More often than not, the exam ones come in delayed, and the cohort of candidates who took them are already gone. And so we feel the efficiency should be about the learning assessment measures. And the third one is absenteeism management action planning needs to be done across schools, school circuits, and regions and districts. Next slide. Dealing with absenteeism also is a concern of DIOC, and indeed, DIOC and MIOC at their level, where G is already part of it, and the local authority of that district also part of it, I think we can deepen the relationship to continue to make a case where challenges, opportunities are explored together by all these major constituents to make actions that deal with absenteeism. To that end, they could develop something like local bylaws that guide the people at their area. And we are sure the interests of GES will be catered for because GES is already part of the MIOC or the DIOC as it is. And so they may not do things that will be too extreme at the cost of GES and indeed its membership. SMC and PTA engagement activities to manage the support for fight against absenteeism, and indeed the broader picture about the presenteeism we talked about along the line will also be managed because people will then come to school and we will be seen as learning and not just coming to school and not being part of the school. And the case for the teachers is the same. Indeed, capacity strengthening, vibrance and independence and proactivity of decision-making will occur if you allow SMCs and PTA to support the DIOC mandates to run how schools get things done. Redirecting energies of absentee learners into worthwhile and handy activities is another thing we are recommending to be done. Because the reason for absenteeism may be the person doesn't have anything that is moving the person to be in school. And so we should give skill, looking at the 4 types of skills, namely foundational, digital, transferable, and job-specific skills. We should have an appreciation of how this can be done. In this regard, the report done by UNICEF recently on skills mapping is a very important one to refer to. Next slide. In dealing with the teacher absenteeism, which would then complement the student absenteeism concern, we recommend that there should be some strengthening and indeed leveraging on inspection arm of NASIA as against the GES supervisory role. These two will come together to manage the concern very well. And how would this be done? Relying on technology to enhance NASIA's work in school inspection and monitoring activities. As we heard from their presentation, monitoring as they undertake it does not go too deep into the bigger picture of schools we have in Ghana. And we recommend a few things to be done in that regard. One is teacher presence and absence in schools. We could use mobile phones to send data to cloud systems. Geographical information system techniques abound now, and there's a big picture of a project we're doing with RIEP that we can harness in our country as well. Distance to school variables, among others, should be explored in that regard. We could also refer to the university, Boto University in Botswana model, where they are able to inspect schools from a distance. So they have several sites, but just sitting at one place, they have more ethical ways of supervising schools. Next slide. Again, dealing with the teacher concern, we continue to see the issue of collaboration coming in forefront. NASIA could collaborate with other agencies, including Ghana National Fire Service, NADMO, Ministry of Health, Red Cross, Environmental and Sanitation, to support school inspection. Why? Because what is happening within NASIA may not have this level of expertise to check readiness, response, fire alarm systems, and other red flags. And so we feel this level of collaboration is very key. And this requires data generation and indicator systems to be put in place on what variables are key to pursue, and indeed what lens will all these agencies and departments be looking at things from. Outsourcing and collaborating with other bodies and NGOs to undertake monitoring and inspection of school is another recommendation we give, because if the last report we had is for just 1,000 schools in Ghana, we feel the big picture situation must be created. And to that end, NASIA may want the hands of other support systems to help them run the show in terms of how many schools they can visit. Map and profile these happenings around emergencies and disasters. We require that support agencies and their roles must be mapped out. So if it is Ministry of Health, Ministry of Gender, and all that come to the picture, their mandate, alignment of this mandate to that of the Ministry of Education, and indeed its agencies, as well as indicator system on early warning systems, are called to the fore. Next slide. Emergency and disaster mapping profiling require also coordination, and to that end, the totality of education provision, disaggregated by levels of education provision, as well as system level management of education, need to take into consideration how it can map its coordination role with other sectors and agencies. Strengthen health, safety, and well-being assessment of schools. Indeed, in terms of students and school staff, is a very important one. We calling for referral and support system, as well as instituting comprehensive health, safety, and well-being platforms at the district level. We feel that is much manageable than even regional and national. We need to review, update, and operationalize existing plans to mainstream emergency preparedness. In this regard, it is commendable that ADIOP has been updated for the various districts. ADIOP is the annual district education operational plan. Thank you, Madis. And this has been updated to include emergency and disaster responsive indicators. But we are not too comfortable with whatever we have. We continue to grow it until it becomes dear and usable and friendly forever. So we also have GES and DIOC to identify emergency materials storage systems. So there could be some quick first aid things that manage pandemics, manage thick smoke when there's big fires, when there are big, torrential rains and stuff like that. You should have a place where, but this is might not be the mandate of GES. It may be the mandate of NADMO. All we are calling for is harnessing what we have available in country in a more efficient manner. Continuous retooling of the guidance and counseling units as we have it now, so that it gives opportunity to offer psychosocial support as well as cultural leveraging for the well-being of people, because people's stress level become, kind of move up and down, as it were, in terms of pandemics like this, as well as other emergencies. To that end, we need to do that for the guidance and counseling unit. Build a capacity of school-level system to deal with emergencies. And this level of work, of course, a lot have been done already. When we saw the back-to-school campaign, we saw a number of things coming alongside it. But to that end, we asked the question, how can we uplift the already done training to the point that people begin to practicalize things beyond the school, even to the home, so that it will stay with us for a long time. We can harness the clubs and associations that exist in schools among teachers and even students, to the point that this also provides an anchor for supporting resilience building. Produce a list of practically grounded steps, such as first reopening of schools. As we saw with the secondary education, the tracking system, in cases of pandemic, reopening should not be an option of wholesale reopening. It could be phased reopening. So for even kids who are in the same class, some may go to school in the morning, some in the afternoon. Radical steps require radical actions. To that end, these are some recommendations. And physical and remote options can be also blended. Some may come to school physically on Monday, and others join remotely in cases that work. We are doing down all this to the district level because the district dynamics of schools will continue to change. That end, they know what will work best in their case. Complementary basic education and formal education may still continue in rural communities in a guided way when enhanced safety protocols are put in place. We saw during this pandemic that there were places where there were virtually no radios, televisions, internet, and even if there were internet, there's no electricity availability to make sure that they can charge their devices and use them and all that. We recommend that such places, if it is at all possible, and that's why we use the word guidedly, the safety protocols available should be ensured. But one way we can still deal with the concern is to make sure that the kids have their books at school, the books they have at school, they take them home so they can do self-study, supported and home learning for that matter. PBME may want to work with the relevant bodies to undertake COVID-19 related research studies and connect them to that are connected to education in much broader areas or urban areas. Our recommendations are threefold. One, map focus the science, the findings, and the recommendation of various education-related studies done during this period of the pandemic, as we've had it. It will give very good reflection points. Number two, to build a portfolio of areas that are worth exploring. So beyond doing this incidence mapping in bullet one, we want them to have a portfolio of areas that are worth exploring based on the synthesis they do. Three, this will mean they should anchor the things around maybe the Ghana Learning Radio, the things that around access to rates, learning opportunity offered to teachers, to the learners, the benefit that came. There are very interesting work that people have done that we can leverage on. But the differentials between radio and television access, online availability to a number of people, need to be explored more carefully so that we don't make more generic statements to things around access provision to more broader education options, which serves just the interest of minority few as against the majority. Next slide. A rapid assessment is always important in times of emergencies. So we should be sure of the options of rapid assessment. It could be rapid assessment about people who are affected, rapid assessment about learning, rapid assessment about stress level movement and stuff like that. Indeed, there is an opportunity to leverage on demographic and health survey, multiple indicator cluster survey. We fight our way to make sure some interesting variables to education are infused into these data points to make sense for decision making at the ministry. Sustainability should be built in resilient systems so that it's a cross-cutting concern for the education regimes that we have it. And so, for example, the radio lessons that are recorded and then the back and broadcast anytime disaster strike are very important avenues we could explore, much as there are other dozens of options that can be explored. The renewed step to make at least all GES officials proficient in the field of educational planning. Indeed, it's the renewed interest to make at least all GES planning officers proficient in the field of educational planning is very important. I think around our discussion, we realized that there are some planning officers who do not have planning background. That is a bit dangerous. And so we feel that working with the appropriate institution, this should be done. At least master's level degree in planning for a whole district is the way to go. And it gives that level of responsiveness. And then making teachers useful resources to be able to teach during emergencies also is an important thing. We saw that when we had to bring people to prepare them to do the Ghana Learning TV and all that. Next slide. Students should be provided enough materials, worksheets, books, which we have talked about, to afford their home study. Because we realized that TV, online, and radio was not accessible more to majority of kids in the rural and disadvantaged groups. Those differences were part of the study IEPA did recently, and so as well as other studies that were reported throughout our Wednesday presentation. And we feel this needs to be flagged. Also, training and campaigns targeted at learners and teachers on detection, preparedness, and response to issues of emergency and disaster is another key concern as we have noticed it. The SPIP or School Performance Improvement Plan preparation required the support and collaboration of specialized third parties. And these specialized third parties, as we have known today, include Ghana National Fire Service, keep naming them. These are specialized bodies with their capacity and ability to, intrigue our thinking on what variables are key in our planning process. We need to activate that. District to develop risk register. We feel risk register is very important. There are areas around Accra that may be earthquake zones, and so levels of issues around risk around earthquake may not be something of interest to Brong-Ahafo, largely. But there are other germane things to Brong-Ahafo, specific districts, that are truly germane to them. And so we are again talking about drilling down the fine details of these at the district and probably the regional level to make comprehensive registers that give risk status, management plans, and options to averting situations when they occur. Curriculum should be packaged in such a way that children are able to respond to emergencies. We are not saying that all our curriculum should be about emergency responsiveness. But along the line, in the chain, the examples of their comprehension and essays they write should reflect some of these so that it becomes a working culture in their lives. Next slide, please. The incidents to map out what digital technologies is available and where they can be found and intensity of use. The fact that Ghana Statistical Service says that Apramdo district or circuit has so and so number of radios doesn't mean that all manner of people having those radios use them. This intensity of use dynamics is an important one. So we need to take note of those. And around our group, a number of people said they have radio, but they don't remember the last time they listened to radio. Kind of interesting, isn't it? So undertake follow-ups on other required essential areas. So when people have the laptops and all that, they need power source, they need internet, they need storage services. And in this regard, we have low-end options like iBus, which may not require internet availability, but of course, may require issues around power to power it for it to keep working. We need to deepen the teacher per laptop project, which is a very good initiative by government, so that teachers have these accessible resources, and then a number of things get loaded onto them, and then we keep making the monumental change as we want it for a country. Collaborate with telecommunication companies to build digital infrastructure to deliver digital learning. Good example we had is the Vodafone UNICEF pilot engagement activity, which is a very interesting one we are learning from. And so we can do more targeted options like that. And this could be even specific targets for some specific districts, which may not be at scale options to undertake. We may need dedicated radio and television channels to deliver lessons because existing station will not give you that much airtime. A case in point, the GTV will not give you a whole 3.5 hours to make sure that children are in the home and learning. So we need to continue to diversify options so that we can build resilience in times of emergencies and disasters to be able to manage things. Next slide, please. We need to cascade the campaign from regional to the circuit and indeed the school community level, so that the campaigns doesn't end at a float at the regional level or district level, where the actual people who actually be disadvantaged are in places where they don't get to. All campaigns around back to school, around emergency preparedness and all that should drill down to the community level. After all, Ghana Education Service in Accra is not the owner of the schools in the villages. The people in the community, they send their kids there, they feed the people who are the teachers there and all that. That community responsiveness should be seen in this spirit. And therefore, systematize health, safety, and well-being campaigns rather than one-off options are to be recommended and pursued. Provision of support for some identified vulnerable learners to go back to school in terms of books and things that may have been probably in cases of flood, people's student bags, books may have been destroyed. So those kind of support may be there. But this may not be for entire whole country because some people may be more affected compared to others. Next slide. Building on knowledge and capacity building of teachers through alternative avenues for professional development is a recommended step, much as motivating teachers through any means possible. As we saw in Ghana, for a whole 9 months, Bernard, correct me if I'm wrong, 9 or 10 months when the school closures was on, teachers were being paid. Very interesting. And so this is a very recommendable thing we might have overlooked, but it's a major step to be able to make sure that the teacher motivation is alive and continue to, to stay alive, as it were. Equip teachers to use ICT resources, including remote ways of assessing learners. It's a very important thing. But in this regard, two things were flagged. If kids were to use radio as a means of learning, just think on top of your mind what options there are to be able to assess them using low-stakes options, to be able to assess them using high-stake options. The reflection is ours, and it begins now. Next slide. So we need to collaborate broadly in all these respects with the MMDAs working alongside DIOC to mobilize resources for local areas to run education. And much as that ownership from the DIOC and indeed the district assembly comes to the fore, there is more monumental changes that can be happening in the school because that ownership and that support would have been garnered. We need to mobilize resources from all levels and resources internal as well as internal funding avenues. We have to profile them, we have to map these ones, and once they are generated, they ought to be managed as well as much as possible. Indeed, efficient allocation of resources is a very important variable when it comes to times of emergencies, because somebody's need is upper tiered compared to other people's need, which is lower tiered. That consideration to be taken into consideration in terms of textbooks, the allocation and stuff like that. I think we need to harness this more carefully. Next slide. If we do all this, then the plenty things we have talked about ought need to be put in perspective in terms of a plan. For the sake of time, we couldn't finish with our plan. Next slide, please. We would have dealt with the short, medium, and long term. But for the sake of ideas, next slide, please. We flag 5 things. The first one is we can have an addendum to the ESP that has an education sector emergency plan, national, in view. Number 2, at the district level, the use of ADIOC to design annual plans with updated indicator systems as explored should be pursued. 3, the regional directorates of education need to draw up plans for action. What we have known over time is that the ADIOP happens at the district level, whereas there is no design plan that coordinates all these at the regional level. This may be contested, but that's what the reality checks shows. We need to have one arm at the regional that coordinates all these pieces. Ensure synergy among all the levels of planning in the education system. And so for the schooling system as well as the system management level of education, these priorities must be, synergy must be built. And then opportunity to tease out during ideas from business meeting, much as we are having it this way, will afford us really the practically grounded issues in our education system to mitigate. If you do all this, then what will be our concluding comments? Our concluding comments are 4, probably 5. The first is sustainability should be built in all the things we are talking about. Whatever we do that is one shot may not be enough. Once we are able to deal with something, we begin to plan for the next one. And so sustainability of funding and all school textbooks and all that is a sure way to go. Ensure gender-sensitive content as well as plan remote content as well as children with special needs, girls, alternative learning option students and all that are called to the fore. They need to show intervention that have promise and continue to deepen them in terms of scaling out. It's also recommended. And district and community-led activism, as we have seen, the center of attraction is the community. The community, and indeed the community. And finally, if we bring all hands on deck, we can be able to deal with more multifaceted issues that confront education. But my concluding remarks will not be full if the 30 seconds to be given to Madis is not given to Madis. All right, so in that regard, I can only thank you all very much for listening to us.
This will take questions and the microphone is ready. Okay, Yusuf, please come.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Indeed, resilience is a very big, very broad area, and it's something that I am very interested in. And education itself is equally broad. which level of education are we, I don't know if we are targeting the entire education system, or we want to say, okay, let's focus on this angle or this aspect of education. Because I know resilience, I understand resilience to be the ability of a system to be able to absorb shocks and rebound back to normal. Which sector? Because already the pre-tertiary sector, you mentioned some schools.
I think your question is clear. You are not trying to clarify your question. Your question is about which levels.
Which level?
Yes.
And what are the shocks? What are some of the shocks that we are envisaging? We already have COVID. That's just one example. But there are shocks that we are already experiencing, our school system is already experiencing.
Yeah.
And what are some of the which ones are you tailoring them to, and which sector?
Good.
That would be very good.
Very good question. Thank you very much. So I think two things. The issue of risk assessment and risk register, for that matter, has been mentioned. The reason why risk register is being done is the priorities and the concerns of levels will be taken into consideration. Much as that is done, issues of priorities against shocks and absorbers would have been dealt with more broadly over there. Note before, at the beginning end of this presentation, the argument has gone that the cross-cutting concern should be inclusivity. And if people get accessible basic education without getting secondary and tertiary education, we've missed it as a country. So to that end, all levels are important. But we have also flagged that disadvantaged species and lower tiered options, for example, persons by dint of circumstances. We talked about girls' education, flagging it, STEM education, flagging it, and all that. This becomes specialized for the case they happen to be in. And in that respect, early childhood and ECD may be more vulnerable compared to basic schools. Basic school more vulnerable compared to junior high schools, and the story continues. So that will be the response I'll give. We are targeting inclusivity, but at the same time, we are interested in making sure that things that will jeopardize provision of social justice and equity will be dealt with in those respects.
Thank you, Dr. Might. My name is Richard Amoa. I work with Africa's Ghana, Bolga, but here in the name of NED. Doctor, thank you so much for the presentation. I have two appeals to make. This is not directly going under your presentation, but across MAP, there's a need for re-empowerment or re-enhancing teachers' knowledge in the various areas, from short, medium to long term. But this can be contested though. I have realized that often when trainings are planned from the national level, cascading down to a lower level, sometimes there appear to be a bit of rush in taking teachers, for that matter, people who are supposed to take care of the downstream stakeholders. So I want to appeal where there will be a need to plan training for special teachers to implement some of these good ideas on the ground. Let's really allow some time for it. Allow people like in STEM when we're making our presentation, facilitators who really take their time and identify the individual differences in teachers. Excuse me to say, we still have some teachers who are BBC. Some areas need to be deliberately given time for the teachers to build on, so at the end of the day, all that we are looking for will be effectually done. And I also want to appeal, I know all these things will require some dedicated budget allocation, and we need to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kujedu, Minister of Education. And thank you, Doc, for the presentation. My question will be around the guidance and counseling, but it could also be cross-cutting if the question is useful. Now, does the retooling, for instance, include or perhaps consider a PPP approach? You know, similar to what, for instance, NTC is doing. So now for CPD, they have some service providers who are helping NTC to provide continuous professional development. Guidance and counseling is very important, but similar to what the previous speaker spoke, some of what happens after an emergency could be a very long-term effect, and you want people who will be on the ground to consistently follow up and follow through. And so my question will be, how do we perhaps work using the PPP approach so that it's not always government per se who is looking at it, but the need at the ground could have a school or even a community or district look at it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you have really landed on our very last slide where we said all hands on deck. All hands on deck, and indeed all hands on deck. And so the PPP approach is certainly welcome. Development partners, NGOs, civil society continue to make their mark, and indeed individuals continue to make our mark. We were here about 3 days ago when our chairman said he was able to, chairman of the occasion said he was able to procure some funds for Asheshi without Asheshi knowing. Do you remember that experience? That's the kind of thing we're thinking about. So as a country, our individual support is really called to the fore. That's why we are saying all hands on deck. But to the matter of the guidance and counseling, the key things we flagged were two: to make sure that there are structural readjustment to the expanded, or call it refined, mandate of guidance and counseling, so that it can anchor the issues around well-being as well as psychosocial support, as well for the kids, the learners, parents, teachers, and all that. That mandate has been there, but given the new circumstances dictated by issues around disaster and emergencies, it becomes prudent. We relook at it carefully. But the second issue around that is the personnel. So the structure is one, and the personnel within them is yet another area to flag more profusely. So those were our two key areas we are directing attention to, but at the same time, we feel free that the science and the practice should dictate the pace of how we engage with these variables.
Doctor, thank you very much for your presentation. You and your team, you have done a very good job. Except my name is Smaila Shai Buganda, planning region. I am a bit about some few things, and with your permission, let me tie them together and be able to ask the question I want to ask. Having said a lot about emergency preparedness, by extension, the resilience of the system, you got to that point where you mentioned certain plans in the short, medium to long term, and certain structures are mentioned in, let me make reference to the DIOC, for example, and it functions, as well as the ADIOC, which is a plan. For me, it appears like it is a short-term plan since it's an annual plan. Now, the ADIOP, as we know it up to this point, it has not been implemented effectively the way we expect to be able to sort of solve some of the problems at the district level. Funding has always been a problem. But embedded in this plan are funding sources and agencies also, which oftentimes you do not find most of the plans of these entities actually, coming together the way you expect to have that, to operationalize the plan the way you expect. My question therefore is, is it that we are going to really look at or the functions and probably resource these entities very well, SMC, the DIOC, as well as the annual district education operational plan to make sure that it works the way we expect at that level. Otherwise, an emergency, for example, like the roofing of a particular school building, most often than not, the district director will rely on the district assembly. They don't come just immediately in the short term as you expect. So such a building can stand for almost a year, just by virtue of the fact that one portion of the zincs have been removed. When you have that situation, would you still be referring to the fact that you have an operational plan at the district level?
Thank you very much for your question and the context you provide. Conceptually, there is something we need to correct here. ADIOP, which is Annual District Education Operational Plan, right, is not only to be seen as a short-term strategy. Although it's an annual plan, the regime of ADIOP becomes something we use for a longer time. Okay, so UNICEF, how long have you been doing ADIOP? Yeah, so I think you should see this as a forward-moving thing, rather than a short-term thing. Conceptually, that's what I want to correct. Yeah, it's a moving plan. It's revolving, as it were. So we need to have that in our mind. But number two, I think you made a very important point regarding the fact that it's an operational plan. You can call it action plan, which means it must be a costed plan. After all, if you do the plan and it doesn't have leg to move, it doesn't become a working plan again, you know, as it were. So you made a very important plan. The fact that we are now harnessing how DIOC, and indeed for that matter the districts, have the capacity to be able to carry most of these actions to bear in their districts means that we are moving towards deeper implementation regimes than ordinary planning regimes. I think in part of our reimagining how we undertake our education, we want to move away from ordinary planning and having nice plans on shelves than doing doable plans. And the element you mentioned, which is the money to carry out activities, I think sometimes we are overly ambitious about some of the items we put in our plan. Two things have been flagged in our presentation. Things that are risk-laden and things that are operational-laden. The operational-laden ones are the soft end. The hard end ones, which we mostly do not have upper hand over, which are those going to our risk register, are at the other end. We may not be able to quantify in terms of money how to deal with those concerns, but it gives us that level of preparedness. So I think your point around how money should be procured for all this is a well-taken one. And I feel together we are saying one thing, that we need to push most of the things that have been good success story we've had in this country forward in terms of implementation. So largely I can only comment your second part, and thank you very much for raising that. Sandra is up there.
Thank you. I'm Ezekiel Osebo, Bono East Regional Planning Officer. I want to recommend UNICEF and others for the effort they've made with the ministry, with the EIE, the Education Emergency Training, the ones that the plan officers had. I think it was a pilot they want to do, and they say they want to start with the 47 districts in the new created regions. But as you rightly mentioned, the risk assessment you are recommending we put together in our districts and so forth. I believe that it's not only for the new created regions. Emergencies are everywhere. And as rightly mentioned, with the ADIOP, thank God now it is there. It has been updated for us to include emergencies and their preparedness over there. But I want to still recommend, like my brother was saying, that this will not just end at the district level trainings. We should go down to the community levels and then to even the schools where heads are trained and they are empowered to prepare in times of emergencies. Take the case where you go to a school where, or a community where a teacher, in an attempt to cross to the other side to go and teach, because of lack of basic tools like a life jacket, swimming and then is drowned, and that ends the day. I believe some of these things should not be, when we have emergencies, we can be prepared enough to take care of some of these things. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So that was it. Thank you so much, Dr. Thank you. Shall we give them a round of applause? Let me assure you that all the recommendations have been taken. We've noted them, and definitely next year we'll give you an update on how we've been able to implement all of that. So quickly, we'll take a presentation on the use of data for policy planning at the regional, municipal, and district levels. And that will be done by Dr. Evelyn Odro, former boss of the National Teaching Council. A round of applause for Doc. Are you coming? So you are. Okay, so let me hand over the mic to Dr. Odro.
Thank you very much. As a way of grooming, I want Bright to start the presentation whilst I support in answering the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, yes, policy planning and management. I think I better start. So, for our group, it was a very lively one. I believe we happen to be the largest in number. We discussed issues around data, planning, and then almost all the other issues that the various technical groups discussed. This is purposely because we are coming from the policy and management perspective. So all the other presentations we have heard, at the end of the day, someone has to be in charge, someone has to ensure that in terms of policy or in terms of implementation, there is proper coordination. So emerging issues around data gaps. We noted that data storage has become a challenge in our various districts and regions. And this is particularly because we don't have modern gadgets, and in most of our offices, we have officers who are using their personal gadgets to do that. And what happens is when the person retires or is transferred, the person leaves with all the data belonging to the district or the region. We also noticed that there is limited capacity and skills in data collection and processing. We really appreciate the fact that the previous group mentioned capacity building for planning officers, and that ties into what exactly we have identified, that we need capacity for officers who lead the data collection and processing processes, approaches. We had challenge with data consistency. So our data is inconsistent. You take data from a headmaster. For example, Free SHS Secretariat will take data from the same schools, and then perhaps NACA takes data from the same school, and then you see disparities here and there. We notice that there is also delay in data submissions, especially when headquarters or the ministry calls for data. And this comes at a very short notice. So not all our data is already available in the various offices. So when that happens, you see that people have to start running around to gather and all these things cause a lot of problems. In fact, at the end of the day, you may agree with us that the data, because we are in a rush collecting and doing it, you have issues with the quality of the data. Then in terms of effectiveness of our planning system, issues came up around the non-utilization of data. We talked about ADIOP, SPIP, SPPP preparation, and one will wonder when you take a typical ADIOP or a SPIP, you wonder whether this has been informed by data, at least at that level. And this also is because most often the practice of data collection is such that we wait until someone requests. And so down there, we don't know what exactly we can use the data we always collect for. Then we had inadequate support for the planning unit. I think that you can see already when we talked about people using their personal gadgets for the office. And so it means planning officers or the planning unit with statistics officers and all those people who work there work under stressful conditions in order to get us the data that we use. We had poor evaluation and performance management, especially at the sub-national levels. We know that now head teachers, directors are signing performance contracts. You can just engage a head teacher or a district officer or a district director sometimes on, okay, so you've signed performance contract and the KPI says this. Please, what does that mean? And what you get will shock you, because they have signed, but they don't really know what it means. And then, so if you don't know what the KPI means, how are you going to evaluate it in the first place? So the evaluation becomes a challenge. Then we talked about poor documentation of time-tested best practices. We do have some best practices happening across the country, but how are we documenting and learning from it? And this will actually also tie into the issue raised by a previous group on the matter of trying to do a skills gap analysis before any form of training is offered. So in terms of absenteeism and education delivery in general, this will cut across all the other issues. We noticed that teacher and student absenteeism is greatly impacting the learning outcomes that we are seeing. You saw from the presentations of the regional directors and some of the research papers that were presented. We also noticed the inadequate financing hinders implementation of informed policies. So policies are there. At the end of the day, when the funding is not available, you are unable to carry out what the policy recommends that you do. Political interference is affecting the enforcement of best practices. We have examples of teacher attrition. Some teachers want to move, and if you look at the rate at which they are moving, in fact, the principles have been set. If someone does not fall within and you want to enforce it as a director, then there are some interventions from various courtesies. There are other situations where directors are enforcing it in one particular district, and so you see that people begin to drift to a nearby district where things are a bit relaxed. So these issues are actually affecting the enforcement of our regulations. Weak stakeholder participation and engagement. Yes, engaging the community members, parents, and even our students themselves in the procedures. In fact, as we gather here, I wonder whether some students have been invited or students' representative groups have been invited. So participation and engagement is key. Indiscipline among students, of course, since we are not engaging them enough, all we are interpreting their actions to mean is indiscipline. Yet we don't really know why they are showing those signs of indiscipline. Elsewhere, they have defined indiscipline as a sign of something that is not working. So what is it that is not working? That our children will register for BEC or WASI, and the moment they finish their registration process, they don't come to school again. And everybody is like, oh, these days the children don't respect. Anyway, it's amazing how someone will enter a track to run, and he runs and gets almost to the finishing line and then wants to step out of the track. And that is what is happening to our final year candidates. So when they register, they know they are almost finishing, and yet they are rather relaxing at that stage. So it's something we need to revisit as a nation. So of course, lack of students' voice in deciding the way forward for their education. We seem to be planning everything from our perspective for the children. But there are times that we need to actually listen to them so we can plan better from their perspective as well. Poor leadership and management skills among heads of schools and other educational leaders. Now, having taken stock of those emerging issues, we came up with these recommendations. We think that data needs should be determined at all levels, especially at the grassroots level. So as a head teacher, to be able to evaluate your own performance, what kind of data do you need? So it is not when you wait until a form, either from EMIS or from MSRC or any other quarters comes to you and say, oh, give us data on this. And so this makes the head teachers give the data because someone has asked for it. But what are they using it for? So the data needs to spring up from that level. We want to pursue modernization of our data collection, analysis, and storage system through the use of appropriate technology. Definitely, the times that we have now actually should be advantageous to us to utilize the technology to improve data collection, storage, and utilization. Then we suggest that we introduce student tracking system using unique student ID numbers from the KG level. Fine, there is something has started in terms of this SHS with the introduction of free SHS, but we think it's not enough. What we are proposing is that let's assign specific and unique codes or ID numbers to the children right from kindergarten, and then they keep that ID throughout their system, their educational journey, and then at the end of the day, we can track. And this will also help us in the data collection and in terms of double counting or double collation. A child moves from one school to the other, is counted as dropout in that school, but is counted as enrollment in another school. And so at the end of the day, when you put the data together, you have some double counting going on there. Then provision of a well-established planning and data management unit. We are not saying that we should create a new unit. What we are saying is that there is a planning unit, and that is the unit that is managing data. So we should resource it and make sure that it is effective. Of course, resourcing it will also mean that officers that manage those officers or lead those officers are well resourced in terms of knowledge, in terms of skills, and all that they will need to operate effectively. The preparation of SPIP, the school performance and partnership plans, that's at the SHS level, and the ADIOP, we think that it should be strengthened to become the main policy planning tool at the district and school levels. Yes, those are the policy planning tools we have, but how do we do it? You heard a colleague just express a concern. They prepare the ADIOP and then nothing happens. Perhaps we are doing something and the ADIOP is also somewhere. Then in terms of teacher license, we want the licensing system to be reviewed. What this means is that we want to be able to critically assess teachers to be able to handle the special subject areas, especially in the sciences and science and mathematics. That ties to the STEM agenda that we have as a nation now, and so I think the first group that presented said something similar to this, and so the thoughts are coming together. So we want this kind of forum to also be extended to the regional, district, and school or community levels, and through that, we will ensure that we are encouraging students' participation. So if it is not very possible for us to bring students, not a lot of them though, to the national level like this, when we actually decentralize this process, we are not saying we shouldn't do the national one, we will do, but we should also extend it, regional, district, school, or community level. At that stage, at least 1 or 2 students can come in and also share their thoughts. And we believe it will enrich the discourse. So introducing time clogging system for all schools, we heard the minister said it's a possibility, and we agree as a group. We are saying that time clogging system should come to help us manage the issue of absenteeism from our teachers and our staff. Now, emergency in education should be made a flagship area in all plans. So again, it ties to the resilient group, what they are saying. What we are saying is that every form of plan that we are doing, whether we are going to have STMIE clinic, whether we are going to have sports, whether we are going to train teachers, there should be some little component for emergency, because emergency can come in any form. We shouldn't, it may not be in a kind of a communicable situation like COVID-19, but we will need to be prepared. So the focus here is about preparedness. Anything can happen, and should it happen, how do we ensure that people are safe? And in terms of teaching and learning, how do we ensure that there is continuous learning whilst we are trying to manage the emergency situation? Then there should be a strong linkage between the universities or the tertiary institutions and the senior high and then technical vocational institutions. We can do this by letting the universities adopt one or two schools and let the students from time to time from the senior high school come over and see what goes on there. That will actually motivate them, especially in the STEM education agenda. We want the virtual learning to be institutionalized, and we want this to become a strategy for our emergency education. So if we have emergency that will prevent people from going to a normal classroom situation, we can leverage on the virtual learning platform. We want to establish an institution for instructional leadership and management, and that this institution should be in charge of organizing regular training for all heads of schools and directors. It is important because we need these instructional leadership skills in managing schools and even the districts at large. Then we are aware of an accountability for learning framework that has been from we are calling only when we apply actually get um, to this kind of facility. And use this approach to, as by way of policy, as students who begin to absent themselves after registration for examination, that when they do that, we want a clear guideline to say that if you are doing that, then you become a private candidate. You rather go and write your exam as a private candidate. If you want to write as part of the school, then you still need to abide by regulations governing the school. In the medium term, we proposed the introduction of STEM to the children at early stages, as early childhood education. And a lot of activities that our early childhood children do, KG primary level, they are STEM related. How do we bring this into school situation? For example, I believe most of us growing up as kids have used cans like tin tomato can, and then milk tins and those things, and then to make vehicles or what have you. The beating I had from my mother was when I attempted to cut her new bathroom slipper and use it for the loyal tie. And it was not easy for me. Perhaps that was what pushed me away from STEM, yes. So I think that some of these activities, in fact, I haven't sat in the room and listened to all the things from day one. My mind just went back to these things we started doing at that level. And the girls will usually do this, they will fetch sand into these containers and then put it on fire, and they say they are cooking. Or, in fact, trying to heat sand or heat clay, at what temperature will it heat and things like that. Maybe at that level we were not thinking like that, but we were doing something which I believe is highly STEM related, and that is what we are saying, that we should introduce this kind of thing into the school system to promote STEM. It will generate a lot of interest for them as they grow. Then we want to sustain the continuous professional development and capacity building program for our teachers, and this also should be targeted at the STEM. The STEM. We will use clogging system to monitor teacher attendance. So we said it earlier. We scheduled certain official meetings involving teachers should be scheduled towards the vacation. This was a key recommendation from NASIA, and we want the ministry and the GES to explore this and see how it will work. We want to develop unique IDs for students. We said it earlier, and we think that should be done in the medium term. We want to organize TVET and science clinic periodically in all districts. Then we want to integrate emergency in education into all levels of planning activities in the education system. Then by way of long term, we propose that there should be at least one TVET institution in every district. The TVET institutions are woefully inadequate, and we think that if we want to really promote STEM, they also hold a very important aspect of STEM, and so when we expand, it will help us. Then we want the basic skills in educational planning and ICT to become a compulsory requirement for all educational leaders. If you want to become a head teacher, a director, a planning officer, whatever, if you cannot show simple skills in educational planning and ICT, please don't come. Yes, we want those who can do those ones, so that your officers will also not be trying to bully you around. Then, of course, we want to expand school facilities to accommodate increasing numbers, and that is why we're calling for completion of ongoing or abandoned projects. Then we'll provide STEM resource centers in every district. We know the ministry has started something already, but it is not nationwide yet. Yeah, in some selected regions and districts. And we think that in the long term, let's do it gradually until the whole country is covered and is benefits from it. Then we want to institutionalize virtual learning as a strategy for emergency education, and this also we've pushed it to the long term because we know it will be a gradual process. Some work is going on already. We should expand it and make it a nationwide agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we have from our group, and thank you for the attention.
Oh, okay. Please come. Thank you. Question? Okay, so there's one. Peter, you can be here.
Hello. Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Kwame Usu Ebiomi from Conference of Heads of Assistant Secondary Schools. Glad to be invited here. But I think I'll go with the expansion program that you talked about, that these students should be invited here so they will see, or if these programs are replicated in the regions and the districts, we will be able to get the bottom of what the problems are. By extension, I was talking to COPS, Conference of Heads of Basic Schools, who is also an integral part of this, and they are here. I stand to be corrected. I don't know whether APTI is also here, which is a very huge component of the. I do not know whether COPS is here, Conference of Heads of Basic Schools, is an authority that they are not. I was speaking to their leaders. Now, we're talking about data collection. I want to suggest humbly that there should be training for every. We are talking about when you submitting, we talk about the fact that if you don't have those skills, you should not become educational leader. What about those of them who have found themselves into the system, who are not literate in some of these areas? It's my humble recommendation that training is held for them. Now, once the training has been held for them, then you can hold them accountable for any infractions that come beyond that. I also want to say that all these things boils down to people like funding. Right, if things are well founded, we will be able to cross some of these things. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think suggestions well noted, and thanks for those inputs. Okay.
All right, thank you very much. This is a well thought out presentation, and it actually exposed most of the policy issues that, in my opinion, are key. It also exposed some level of a lack of linkage between planning at the national level and at the local level. You spoke about data. There's currently, at the national level, a comprehensive data management system dashboard, which is almost complete. What is left now is to do the school level student information system to collect data at the school level and to link up with the dashboard. In this system, it is envisaged that every teacher and every pupil will have a unique identifier for the whole length of their engagement at the school level. If you are a teacher for the next 30 years, you have a unique identifier. A pupil will have a unique identifier. And then you have some sort of ID card. As you enter the school, you swap, and then it automatically takes your attendance. So teacher attendance, pupil attendance, and that's all sorts of things. This is on the table, and the work is going on right now. But at the district level, at the school level, this seems to be unknown. And to us, this is quite serious. It means that the reforms that are ongoing are not being properly cascaded to the district and school level. And this means that the ministry has a lot of work to do. we speak about leadership. A lot of work has gone on leadership. The current thinking is to set up a specialized national education institute for precisely the kind of proposal that your team was coming up, to train teachers in leadership and management. And then at the GS level, to make sure that the professional pathways, some people becoming master teachers, some going into administration, some going into counseling, and so on and so forth. Working with GSM, NCT, this is ongoing. Once again, the onus is on the ministry to make sure that those who need to know at the district and local level, and to make the required input, are brought on board. I think that in planning for emergencies, it is very good that we plan for emergencies, but one key thing that we have failed to plan for as an emergency is the learning poverty. Currently, we don't know. In 2015, and that is the only data we have convincingly, only 2% of our kids could read with fluency and understanding. Maybe now it has moved significantly, we don't know, but I can tell you that worldwide, learning poverty seems to have, at the last count it was 53%. I now hear that after COVID, it is 87%. If this 87% is true, then probably in Ghana, our situation has become worse. How are we planning this one as an emergency? That is why the minister was saying that, look, we should use this forum to reimagine, to rethink what can we do differently, totally, do both things to totally transform education. And so in planning emergency, remember that if even our 2% is now 20%, it is still totally unacceptable. It means that 80%, even if it's 50% now, it means that half of the kids cannot read with fluency and understanding. And to us, it's an emergency. Yesterday we had a session on English language intervention where we were quoting from the ESP itself. We say that by 2030, 65% of our kids should be proficient. That means that 35% should not be proficient. And we're asking the question, whose children should not be proficient? Really, the people asking the question, we didn't have an answer, and the group too didn't have an answer. But this one shows you that all of us together is totally unacceptable. It should be 100%. And it shouldn't be 2030. It should be as quickly as possible. And the only way to do that is to reimagine, think about different ways of doing things. I like your idea that we should hear from the students. Let me add that we should actually hear from classroom teachers. I've been very, very happy that this year we gave voice to regional directors.
Thank you very much. My name is Peter Anti from IFS 10 UCC. I have two issues. My first issue is if we are thinking about reimagining education, then we need to take a second look at how we use data. Because for me, everything that we are trying to find solutions to lies in what kind of data that we've collected and how useful those data is being used in the system. So I would wish that, one, we look at how easy people like us, researchers, can access data from the Ministry of Education, both at the lower level, I mean the local level, up to the national level. Sometimes it's difficult getting data to even do your work. So if there is a way that data can be made readily available to researchers, maybe you can even tie in, because we are talking about headmasters not understanding the data. Now, if I come to your school and I collect data, you can tie in and ask me that when I finish my work, come and discuss the outcome with me. The district can do the same, the regional can do the same, national we can do the same. So if we are doing this, then we will be able to make fruitful, good use of the data that we are collecting. I also want to ask, what concrete measures are we taking to ensure that the data that sits on the table of the headmaster, who knows the number of students who come to school every day, the district director who knows the number of schools that are not in good shape, the number of professional teachers, you listen to the regional directors, they have all the data available. They know what is really happening. What concrete measures are we taking to ensure that these people put those kind of data into policy planning and interventions? I think that is something that we need to do in order to make sure that we get the right thing today. The last thing is data triangulation is very important. So I don't have a problem with multiple data collection. I think that it is good that different people collect different kinds of data. At the end of the day, we have to put them together and see which one is saying what, and make policies to suit them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So on the issue of what steps are being taken, you saw it in our emerging issues. We said there is non-utilization of data, and so what we'll be doing, or what we have proposed, is to build capacity in that area across board, from the grassroots level all the way to the regional and even the national level. Some work have started. Maybe if Bernard is here, he may clarify later. Some work have started, and we have some data and reports that we are actually interacting with in order to interpret it in line with what is happening in our various regions, and we are going down to the district, and it will trickle down to the school level.
Just to add to that, if you need data, you need to write to the ministry for the data, and the data is available. Sometimes what we see is that people just, go to corners for certain information, but there's a desk, not a desk, a whole unit for data. I think the chief director even just spoke about it. So for the grassroots, the head teachers, this is something that we have identified. They themselves sometimes don't understand, and they don't know how to use the data. So training and retraining is necessary. And then we need to identify, it is how we recruit head teachers and directors. So we need to identify qualified people to head our schools. We need instructional leaders to support us. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Ajay Daniel, the Greater Accra Regional Coordinator for Youth Arise Organization, and I'm also a student of University of Professional Studies, Accra. My worry is about the reason why students drop out at their final year. Not necessarily dropping out, but they decide to stay back for a while and continue at the examination hall. I want to say that, how do we value the voice of students in our country? How do we value the voice of students in our country? I'm saying this because sometimes students maybe have an issue with a teacher from primary 5. It will continue the same teacher. So the person wants to take himself away from the roof of the teacher. So once he or she is being registered to write the exams, then he decides to stay away. But when being addressed to the institutions, they don't really take the things that students have been saying serious. At the end of the day, you realize that 2 or 3 teachers may set their eyes on the student because the person have reported a teacher. For instance, an university may vacate 28 and reopen the next month 11th. How are you expecting students who cater for himself to pay for his school fees? So we get students who will gather themselves, causing chaos in the school, and such issues are not being addressed. So I want to say that if you want to see the issue, we have to come there, we have to listen to the students, and we shouldn't take decisions on behalf of the students without seeking their concerns. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we've made a case for you already. I mean, the students, so that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for a very good presentation. Just a couple of issues here. The first one is about education in emergencies. You know, we're making it look like we've never touched on this before. Over 10 years ago, I was a lead facilitator in this area, and we had a workshop at La Palm where we trained people. Some of the people are here. Bernard is here. Yes. We went around the people for regions and districts. Now, the number of it's not there for us to enroll who want to do science in science. So you go to a secondary school and there's only 1 or 2 classes for science. So many classes for the humanities and the business and others. So that is one of the challenges we face. So apart from the class of the teacher to teach it well, the opening for science studies at upper levels is not there. The labs are not enough to take all the students who want to do science. What's happening to all those who did science and scored between, let's say, aggregate 20 at SHS, aggregate 20 to about 36? Where are they? If we were to do a registration of all the students who have 30, aggregate 30, aggregate 32, 35, where are they? And who said they can't be roped back into the system? Go to UCC and ask. They used to have an access program for science students. People who did not make the cuts with certain courses. They trained them, and I can tell you that there's somebody I know who went through the access program, is now heading the department at Accra Technical University. So it's not as if the system has not produced enough people who can go into science. We have not opened up the system enough to absorb all those who want to go into science. That's why every year there are students who come, they are placed in programs like ours, whatever, after BEC, and they are weeping because they want to go into science. But our idea of science, and the reason why maybe we have challenges, that majority of the people who go into science think that if you go into science and you don't become a medical officer, you don't become a pharmacist, you don't become an engineer, you have failed. So you finish, you did raw mathematics, raw physics, and the the question is, where do they go? Apart from, fortunately, I dove off my heart for all the teachers, science teachers. But the avenue, let's discuss the science issue very well and not pretend that it's the education system that cannot produce them. The system is robust enough and can do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madis.
Thank you very much. I was happy when I saw your recommendation on teacher absenteeism. It's a very important one. We all know that teacher presence is the single most important factor in improving learning outcomes. And so how to get the teachers to be in school is really very important. But I think that we should go beyond just the clocking, biometric attendance taking, because the teacher can still go to the school and be in the school. And we know that when we talk about absenteeism, it comes in different forms. Absenteeism happens in 3 different ways at least. One is the teacher would come to the school, be in the school, be in the class, and not teach. He's still absent because there's no interaction between the teacher and the students. The teacher can arrive late at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and leave at 2 o'clock. He's not taught. Or the teacher will even come, in the afternoon, or come and leave early. So there are different ways in which we lose the teacher presence. So just biometrically allowing teachers to clock in when they come is not enough, and that's the point I just want to make. Let's look at other forms that will ensure that when the teacher is there, they are also teaching the children, because that is what we expect them to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much for enriching the discussion. Yes, who wants to?
Thank you very much. I think in our group yesterday, we spoke very much about leadership. You see, and we have to learn from other people and other institutions. Why is it that private schools are able to do this and support their students to pass, and we have trained personnel and they cannot do this? You have a whole health teacher as a manager of the school, and you allow your teacher to come, clock, and go away. I mean, and how do we get the results? So supervision is also very, very key. And the CISOs and the head teachers, they have to do that, to ensure that the teacher stays when he or she comes, because others are doing it. And I think sometimes I'm ashamed that private schools are performing, supposedly they are performing, and we are not. We also spoke about customer care, that we must try and make our schools like a business of of us. That's our business. That's what gives us food to eat. But we are not seeing it as that. The private school, immediately the car arrives at the school, teachers go and pick their children and welcome them to the school. How do we welcome our students to our schools? So we must do something to attract both students and teachers. Head teachers, how do they motivate their teachers to work? Motivation to work is also a skill for head teachers to learn. So directors, please stop sitting in the office and help.
Okay.
Do more of the visitation and ensure that the teachers are working.
Okay, so we'll take the last.
Yes, please.
Okay, so thank you very much. Oh, Minister, should I go ahead? Okay, so
Okay, so David, we'll come back to you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we have in our midst the Honorable Minister of Education, Honorable Dr. Yawose Educhum, and so I'd like to hand over the microphone to him to quickly give us his closing remarks, and then David, you ask your questions, and then I will wrap it up finally for us so we close for lunch. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassandra. And I'm grateful to every one of you, especially Nana, for chairing this event and spending so much time with us to share his wisdom and insight into the challenges that we face, and especially the opportunities that we have. And to me, that's the most important thing. If we are here for challenges, then we are not going to make headway. There's so much opportunity that we have. We have children who are so well behaved compared to other places. If you have not taught in an American classroom, you say that Ghanaian children are bad. But if you teach in an American classroom where you are told not to smile from September to December, teachers are not supposed to smile during that time. Because once you smile, they think you are easy, you are in trouble. You have to frown and behave as if you are a monster for 3 months before you can have your way the rest of the year, at least in urban American school that I taught in. So for the most part, we have children who are so well behaved. And we need to take advantage of that and work hard to transform our systems. The old paradigm will not pertain. I think all of us came here, and I hear some people are saying that the things are too many, it's ambitious, and my whole thing is this. We've done this for 60 years, and it's not working. It's about time we try something new. You see, children who cannot read after 6 years in the classroom before teachers, and if we have to try English language development, you think it's too much? It's not working. The fortunate thing is that some of us sitting here don't know, because our children are not experiencing it. Our children are reading by the end of KG. The unfortunate thing is that those whose children are suffering are not in this room. And at the next new, going to bus in parents from the villages to come here. If we have to translate into 3 languages, we would. If the parents are not here, we're not going to do the dialogue. If they can spend 1 day with us, let us devote a Parents' Day as part of the National Education Week. And it's not going to be you and me as the parents. It's going to be the parent from that village who has never stepped in this type of room before. Let them come here and let them tell us how we can turn this around. To that parent, when you say you're going to find a new way to teach her child to speak English, they will thank you. Because when Nana laments about the culture and how it is transmitted through language, and I say to myself, the very people who are stopping the language as the main transmitter of the culture is us, the educated elite, who have invariably decided that we'll check ourselves out of the Ghanaian language. We want our children to speak English. Consequently, in many homes, in elite families, our children are not even speaking our language. And they will have taken the right decision because the whole idea is that they want their children to be competitive in school. Being competitive in school means they need to speak the English very well. And the reason why they are making that decision is that we, as education establishment, have not found a way to show them that your child can still do well. Because we're going to use English as a second language teaching and learning strategy. So don't worry, your child will speak your language very well and they will still acquire the English. If we do not find a solution to this, most of us, our children will lose out. And if some of you want to confess, some of you have children who are not speaking your local language. And you made the right decision because you wanted them to be competitive in school. But that is the price you are paying for not developing English language development strategies that can allow your child to learn your language and English at the same time. So when we hear us talking about ELD, it's about ensuring that we can transmit our culture through our language and at the same time be proficient in the white man's language and probably outcompete him in his own language. We are capable of doing both. So there are many things you heard, the National Education Institute, everything you heard is for all of us at the end of the day to satisfy ourselves that we, this generation, did not fail Ghana. And that we held the bull by the horn and decided to do what was impossible. Decided to embark on an agenda that assured us that we could get 70% of our students to pass the WASI instead of 30%. If I look at this room and the talent that is here, the expertise that is here, how can we look straight in the eyes of Ghanaians and tell them that in spite of all this expertise, we cannot get 70% of the children to pass the terminal exams after high school and that we can only do 30%. All of us together can do better. And that is why we are here. And I believe at the end of the day, we are just challenging ourselves. We are being challenged to do more. And I hope we will embrace that spirit and don't look at the Minister for Education as bringing too many reforms, and I hear some people say that. But it's not you. I know it's not you. But there are too many reforms that he's talking about. And I'm saying, unfortunately, in education, if you want to bring about change, you have to do about 10 things at the same time. And that is why we are not seeing the change. We take a school at a Sikado, and we say that we're going to teach the teachers targeted instruction. That's what we are doing. But we are not at the same time doing parent collaboration so that the parents can come to the school. We are not doing back to school day for parents to come, a day set aside that we don't do anything but do one-on-one meeting with the parents. So your targeted instruction is fine, but because you did not tell the parents what you are doing, the child did not get any reinforcement from home, and therefore your targeted instruction achieved only about 30% of the goal. We also did not tell GetFund that, you see, for change to happen in this school, we need to fix this building. So it's a holistic approach to reform that looks at everything. When was the last time the chief of the village was invited to come to the school and talk to the children? When was the last time the Queen Mother was specifically invited? It's not, oh, she came. No, you, the head of the school, invited the chief and the Queen Mother to come. When was the last time we did that? So we hold so many things constant and focus on one, and then it doesn't work. So we have a beautiful school building, but because we did not take time to operationalize it, we have high schools that have opened, and the poor regional director has to be acting headmaster because there's no headmaster. We don't have English teacher because it has not been posted from headquarters. But if we had an operationalization committee, which we are doing for all new schools now, and had a coordinator who made sure, a former retired headmistress or headmaster, who made sure that 3 months before school was open, everything was in place. There were books in the library, all the teachers have been hired, the schedule has been developed, the counselor is in, everybody is there. We're going to get benefit from that school building because everything that goes in the school building has been done. And I don't like talking theories. So the new schools that we're opening now, every one of them is benefit to us. So all that one of you guys, let's look at these challenges, look at it with a new set of eyes, and let's get it right once and for all. We know teachers have to be trained, but there's no professional development allocation. And we are looking at free senior high school budget and want to make sure there's something set aside so that professional development will be done. So I don't want to come here and give you mandates without the support. We all have to come together. Wherever we decide to do, let us all come together, do it right. National Education Institute, English language development, gifted and talented education. Nothing is going to take away from the work that we do. It's going to complement it and make it better. STEM education, laptops for teachers, for students. Nothing is going to take away from what you do. It's going to help you to do your work better. And that is what we are about at the Ministry of Education. And we are honored to have your participation in this new. And we are honored that you are here. To me, the highlight of this year's new was the presentation from the regional directors of education. It has given us great insights as to what is going on in the regions. And next year, we should be able to select a district, 5 districts that are doing some best practices. Then they come here and share with us. 2 teachers that are doing so much good work. We have Teacher of the Year. Those who win the teacher prize. Shouldn't they have been here to share with her how they won, what made them win the prize? So we are missing some opportunities. So instead of 4 days, maybe 5 days. And let us come again, take account of what we did this year, and say to ourselves, we are inching towards a great education renaissance in this country. And that is reimagining education. We'll create a new education system in this country. There's going to be a shift in what we do. The north-south gap should be bridged. OT, Volta, and the northern regions cannot be behind. We can't leave them behind. We're going to do everything for us to get us there. You know, I have to remind myself that I'm a teacher and a politician. In both professions, if you don't talk, you lose your job. So when you give me the mic, I have to remind myself that if I'm not careful, I'll take all the time. Because you know some politicians have lost their seats because the people didn't see them talking, right? So I said to myself, that will never be the reason why they will vote me out. So when I get opportunities like this, I talk too much. So I'll end here, because I think Nana will give us the final closing, and we are waiting to get some words of wisdom and something to take home. But I'm excited to see regional directors, UNESCO's rep in Ghana is here. And this is such a wonderful opportunity. And having forgotten, we're going to do a UNESCO high school in Ghana, bring all the people together from other countries. God richly bless you, and I thank you for your attention. You see me disappear. I have a UNESCO virtual conference, so I have to run away from here. Thank you.
A round of applause again for the Honorable Minister. He speaks with boldness because he's a positivist. He says we can do it. And so, indeed we can. So I think at this point, I would want to call on Nana Chair to give us his closing remarks, and then Reverend Ezekiel would also give us the closing prayer, and then a few announcements.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's nice to see Diallo and Sunny here. This is the first time I've seen Diallo wearing something apart from... He looks more like me now, but he's very handsome. Honorable, forgive me, sometimes these titles. So if I don't give you the title or give the minister the title, he's my son. So understand. But it's nice to always listen to Honorable Edicho. He's quite inspiring. And as he was talking, I had an encyclopedia blazing through my head. And the organizers, where is Bernard Ayensu? He's not here. He dragged me here. I wasn't even aware that something like this was coming on. And when he called me, I said, education, God, this one I have to make effort to be here. But unfortunately, I had to dash back to secondary, back and missed out the Western Regional presentation, which I hear you stop. So at least if I miss the, give the lady a, you know, when we're talking, can we it's just because down here that the most powerful tool we have is education. But yet, what has happened to, we've mostly been in an era of miseducation. That whole book that is there, that 900-page book, it's about miseducation. And if you buy it, please reach out to me because I want to hear. I didn't write it for money. So if you manage to get one, please. I wish I could give it out for free, but if you give it out for free, people wouldn't read. So when Professor Ewa wanted it, I said, pay 1 penny and I'll pay the rest for you. And I just did that. But on the more serious side, I've been teaching in schools in my area. I said, don't clap. One whole year I haven't done it. And I was telling the young man, there is something missing. It's because of COVID. But I go around the schools and teach. Why I go around is that some schools come to me, but when they come, you have to give them, the young boys, soft drinks and biscuits. But when you go there, you don't spend anything. I've retired, so it's easier for me to go there, talk to the students, you know, their JSS and so on, inspire them about their culture and et cetera, and then move on. If you're within the Western Region area and you invite me, I will come. It's my duty. I had the fortune of chairing the Nkrumah Derba at Nkroful this year. One of the things that I told say not how many you know working so he used to give me a bottle of Fanta. So when I said I could use anything could have happened at the same time. People are building houses. Let them build them. The greatest thing that you can do is to build human beings. Nothing matters more. So let's see what we can do with this to make a better Ghanaian, to make a better African. I've heard the Honorable Minister talk several times. As I was sitting down, I was telling the young man, when we go, we're going to build I built a library, am I right? And most people don't know that I was in the university. I'll get my salary, divide it, and give some to the builder as somebody supported me, and so on and so forth, among other things. I said, when we go, we're going to build a science lab for the community. Most of the people don't. There's nothing in a schedule, but we can do it. I'm going to go into virtual learning. I'm going to bully my friends to give me big TV and so on and so forth. So that's why we watch Manchester United and Chelsea. You can also induce them to go into mathematics. Mathematics is embedded in our culture. When you're doing this, so yeah, then that watch it. They're talking about eternity. You know, that's why when I said what's the name of the guy? Peku announced it. I could go on and on. The things that we do. So please, it's our duty to ensure that the us. Was it base theory? Yeah? Learn. Even look at so important, and we forget. You know, it's a speech that needs analysis. He said something. We're going to build. What is it? Let me try it. The new African. Who is the new African? Is it the corrupt? Is it the one who cheats his brother? Or let us all do this. Please repeat after me. I am. I want to hear. I am. Because we are. Because we are. I am. I am. Because we are. So long as we are, I am. Which translates to the fact that I don't matter. It's the we that matters. It is the we. It is the we. And we've been talking about this. We're born with this. We've gone through this. And the South Africans have a beautiful word for us, Ubuntu. And we've thrown it into the Atlantic. And we are learning Aintu. Me, myself, and I, the triangle. You do that, and as a civilization, African civilization will be doomed. In terms of language, let me tell you the joke I told somebody. In 1935, my favorite African philosopher, he's called Kobna Sechi, went to Mfantsum School and told, as he spoke to the students about language, he then said, Infante, who can translate for me one of the old students, he's dead now, he died at the age of 94, told me this joke, and I've always found it funny. It means that a paw can mean a knot, it can also mean forest. So when you cross the stream, forest, or your mouth knots, obviously that is language, and it carries it. So please, don't same local language, indigenous language. It's not the man. It's not the man who sits in Flagstaff or Jubilee House, or we can fight about that name. I remember a minister visited me. Why are you fighting over Flagstaff and Jubilee House? Give it to the schools. Let the students in the schools find an African name for what the building that belongs to them. Went away, of course. I mean, you know, it's a challenge. It's our house. Should you call it Jubilee? Should you call it Flagstaff House? That'd be fun enough name for us. Challenge the young ones. So there's attachment.
In other important things to do, but you decided to be here for this 4 days. Thank you so much, and I pray that the good Lord will carry you on your wings as you go back to your various destinations. I have some few announcements. Indeed, I have enjoyed you. You've been a wonderful audience, and I've been so privileged to be your MC. My name is Cassandra Chumampofo, and when you need me, you can contact me. Chief. All right, so I have some few announcements, but I'll do that after the announcement because we are streaming live on Facebook. And so that announcement will be done after the closing prayer. And so Reverend Ezekiel, come and share the closing prayer with us. After we'll go for lunch, we have part 2, business meeting, but that is for some selected individuals. So when we are done, we'll go. After closing, then I'll do announcement.
Please, can we be on our feet once again? If you can just hum this song, you can just do that. Power and man belongs to our God forever and ever. Amen. Power and might, power and might belongs to our God forever and ever. Amen. Indeed, power and might belongs to you, our God. We started with you and you have been faithful to bring us to a successful end. We give you all the glory. We give you all the honor. Indeed, you have stretched our imaginations once again. You stirred up hope and life in us as a nation. You've encouraged us and you have challenged us. And we ask that, oh God, even as we leave, your hand of grace will rest upon us in the name of Jesus. For whatever decisions you have taken, whatever we've analyzed, the challenges we've given to ourselves, we pray that it will not just remain in this room, but it will follow us in the name of Jesus. As we sleep, as we wake up, stir us up. Remind us through your Holy Spirit that we have a charge to keep, a God to glorify. We have a present age that we must serve, and we have a call to fulfill. Father, we ask that even as we leave, your angels will keep charge over us in the name of Jesus. We plead the blood of your Son Jesus over our spirits, souls, and bodies. For our sakes, we decree and declare the highways clear in the name of Jesus. We will not record any accident, but your mercies will follow us. Goodness will be with us. And when we wake up tomorrow morning, you have a cause to give you thanks and praise for your mighty hand, for your glory, for your love, your mercies, and your blessings over this nation. Thank you, oh God, that a year by now, you will gather once again to reflect on what you have done and to have a cause to say, indeed, we reimagined, and indeed, we have manifested whatever we said we would do. Thank you, God, for answered prayers. In Jesus' name we declare it done. Somebody say amen. God bless you.
Amen. 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 So new 2021 has come to a close. Thank you so much to all of you. Few announcements. Please, after lunch,